All right, here we go. We have a Toronto-based legend in the building today. Keysha Freshh. How are you doing today?
What's up, man? How you doing? I'm chilling. I can't complain, you know?
Yeah, no, most definitely. Like with your legendary work, by the way, too, with your solo stuff, and with a lot of accolades. Actually, it's crazy to see. Being the first young female to have free songs being played on Flow 93.5 back in the early 2010s and all that. Being the first artist to shoot a music video at the Empire State Building, post 9/11 too. Working with the likes of Keysha Freshh and also Mims, and then also performing all over Canada and the United States as well too, and then having a strong family history too, with your father being a well-known figure within Toronto Star and with his work in journalism as well too. So it's a crazy story and all that, and even with the sororities too.
Yeah, man. It's been a lot. It's been a journey for sure. Yeah.
And right now, you've been doing quite well. You recently got a nomination for a Juno for the Maestro Fresh West album, and all that. You also have a couple singles out right now with your bandmate to Lex Leosis and all that. So it's all up from there.
Yes, sir.
Most definitely. So I want to start this story off right away. So you grew up in Scarborough and Ajax. That's correct?
Yeah. I grew up in Scarborough. Grew up Alton Towers, from the Towers. That's where my family kind of moved to. They lived in Silver Springs before that, Flemington Park. So they ended up, in Alton Towers, where I was born. And from there, my parents just kind of wanted to move my brothers and I into a bigger house, a better environment. Just kind of move out of Scarborough. So we moved to Ajax. Which has been cool. When we moved to Ajax, it was really small, and I was the only black kid in my class often. You know what I mean? But it was one or two of us. Same with my brothers. So it was an adjustment because we came from a multicultural area up at Alton Towers, very multicultural. So it was an adjustment. I had my first racist experience. Someone told me to go back to Africa. When I was when I moved to Ajax. So Ajax was very interesting, but it kind of shaped me. Both living in both places shaped me to be who I am today, and I'm just grateful for that.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And in the 90s and the 2000s and all that, Ajax and Scarborough were kind of interesting from what you said, in terms of the racism going on, and with the whole idea of gentrification not being a thing too. So around those times, what was the environment during those times, and how was it growing up with a whole locally high profile family due to who your father was and who your mother was in that sense?
It's interesting because it's there's this line from this song I like called "Protected" by Chino and Steven the Genius, and it's a reggae song, but he says, "Hear what him say. Him only bust because him right off of the boss name. When me just a bust, me never advertise my last name." And I always related to that line because I never wanted people to know my last name because of who my dad was. My dad's a very popular and acclaimed journalist within Canada. And I just didn't, coming into the music industry, I didn't want people to associate my success with who my dad was, because he knew a lot of influential people, obviously. But when I got older, I kind of used that in a way of you know what, other people do it for their kids in other aspects of life. Nepotism is a huge thing. So why can't I just use my name? This is my name. And I'm actually grateful for the work my dad and the foundation that my parents have put in within the community. I'm grateful for that because it's a good name. People know when they hear my last name, it's oh yeah, you're so-and-so's daughter, right? So I get that respect because people respect my father. My dad has covered some of the biggest artists. My dad has covered, has pictures of Drake, literally hard copy pictures, film development of Drake when he was on Degrassi. My dad has pictures of Socrates, Maestros when they were young, coming up. My dad has always been there documenting the history of black artists in Canada. So just to get that respect on the street when people see me say, yo, your dad did my first article and stuff like that when I was coming up. Your dad covered me. It makes me proud. I'm really proud of my father for the name that he's built, and just and my mom as well for the name that she's built in the community. It allows me to just be respected where I go.
Yeah, most definitely. And like you're leading on that torch to like leading on to like the family name too, and like in terms of success and like everything else too in that sense. And like even raising it like with other generations too, like when you have kids or when you have like grandkids too, to realize that whole aspect of like what you guys are, and like what you did like throughout your times like living in that sense. So it's interesting to see.
It is, one of the biggest, what they always say is all you have in this world is your word and your name. Like that's so true. And I just always want to make sure that I'm being a good citizen and respectable, and keep making sure that my family's name is always looked at in a high regard. So yeah.
And like Scarborough and Ajax at that time too. I know Scarborough was sort of big with music back in the 90s and 2000s, with Chocolate, with Maestro, with I think Deborah Cox. I think she's also from Scarborough too. And then I know Ajax, it had T minus and Boy Wonder, even though he's from Pickering in that sense too. But back then, were they known as industry ends back then, or just more so like in as a community?
I mean, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I want to write a book about this because it's so interesting. Growing up in Durham's 905, like we're foundation for Durham. Like I don't really like to say that because I never like to think of myself in those types of regards. But when you really sit back and think about it, like we're foundation in Durham. And then like it intertwines. A lot of us intertwine. And when we first started, I remember being a young person playing basketball outside at Cedar Park in Durham, and T minus being out there, and T minus had just produced the record with Nate Dogg and Bishop Devontée. And I just remember connecting with him, like had him on MSN and stuff like that. And I would like ask him for advice on music and stuff like that. And I remember asking him one time, like, yo, how much do you charge for beats? And he was like $300. And I was like, whoo, that's a lot of money. Now I'm sure he charges, 100 times that. But, it's crazy because we all kind of grew up in this area, and just to see where everyone went, my first studio experience was because of T minus. He sent me to my first studio experience. Shout out to Logic. So, and then like artists like Devontée. Like Devontée went to high school with my homie, so we used to be in the basement rapping. Artists like Sean Leon. I went to elementary school with Sean. I knew his sister was in my class. So I've known him since we were kids. Even Boy Wonder went to Pickering High School with my cousins and stuff like that. So it's interesting how it just is super dope to see how intertwined everyone kind of is, and then how everyone's kind of branched off and they're doing amazing things. That like it makes me so happy because back then in Durham and Ajax, there was no other girl rapping. Like I was the only girl rapping. I used to go to other high schools and rap with dudes because they just thought it was cool that a girl was rapping. So yeah, man, it's interesting. It's really interesting.
And you went to J. Clark, right?
I went to J. Clark and I went to Doc.
Yeah, because I know J. Clark, they had like this rivalry back then with Notre Dame and all that, so like that was like a huge. Like,
we were attached, yeah. We're two schools attached. Yeah. We share a cafeteria, so of course there's gonna be some rivalry there. But at the end of the day, I mean, like again, Geno Christian, he's he's an amazing DJ in the city. He went to ND at the same time I was going to J. Clark, and he was like one of the dopest ballers, So just to see everyone in the music industry now and how everyone has evolved over at Pickering High, there's producers and the MCs that came out of there, and it's just dope. It's just real dope.
Yeah, most definitely. I don't know if anyone ever asked this like before, but what was like your actual like first introduction to music? And I don't know if you had like any experience on buying like the first CD that you ever bought before.
Yeah, my first introduction to music, I'm born into a musical family, so I've been around music my whole life. I was in the studio when I was 5 years old, so I don't know a time where music wasn't in my life. But, just being 6 years old and having like Mecca and Soul Brother cassettes and stuff like that, we used to sit in front of the radio and dub cassettes all the time. We dub over my mom's old mixes. She gets so mad. Like music was always there. I grew up with it. My first experience with like buying music, when I was old enough, it was like the early 2001. And my mom didn't tell my brother and I that she bought us CD player, because we had cassette players, right? She didn't tell us. CDs was just coming out. They was super hot. She didn't tell us that she bought us CD players for Christmas. She took us to the store and she's like, pick out a CD. And my brother picked out maybe Eminem. I don't know who. I remember what he picked out. And then I picked up Bow Wow's Beware of Dogs. And we were just thinking like, oh, we just get to play it at home on the big, CD player she had. But then I bought that, and then Christmas she gave us the cassette players and CD players, and we had that. So that was pretty cool. But music is just it's in my blood. Like it's my whole life.
No, most definitely. And you've talked a lot about your experience in music, writing your first song, working with like a lot of the greats like Dougie Fresh and like Mims and everyone else too. So you kind of see like that journey from like just writing your first song to like even with these new two things out right now. So you have your own official song out right now, Relax, with Trini, I think a soca artist as well too. And then also Be Mine, you worked that with Lex, and then I think another DJ or like producer. So what was like the creative process for those singles, and what inspired you to make them in that sense?
Be Mine was a very interesting process, because working with someone else is always, it can be fun or it could be just not fun. Working with Lex is probably the most fun I have making music. That's why she's my forever collaborator. When we were part of the sorority, Lex and I just clicked. I mean, we all clicked, obviously. That's how the group came about. We clicked. But Lex and I found this extra interest in each other just because of the things that we like. Like, we're both hip-hop heads. We both study hip-hop. We live and breathe it. Like, we teach it. We take it further, right? So you can appreciate that in someone else. So that's how we kind of clicked and formed that bond. But with this particular record, Lex and I decided, okay, we're gonna go to her family has a really nice house out west, and so we're like, let's go there and let's just chill by the pool and let music come to us naturally. So we set up microphones and speakers and stuff in the living room, and then we just chilled. We ate, we drank, we watched horror movies, we just did fun stuff. And then we'd be like, yo fam, I think I got a hook. I'm literally in the jacuzzi and I'm like, yo, I got this hook. And so same thing, Lex was swimming and she's swimming in the pool, and she pops out and she's like, I got a hook. And she starts singing Be Mine, it just came to her, you know what I mean? So how that kind of came about was super organic. It was just ideas flowing through us in the environment that we were in. And so we recorded Be Mine out there, and we brought it back, got it mixed and stuff like that, which was awesome. For Relax, collaborating with Hey Choppi was really interesting. Hey Choppi's one of Marshall Montano's artists. He's with Marshall's label Monk Music. And Choppi came out with a record a couple years ago called Captain, which was a really big soca record, and it was all through the circuits. If you like soca, you know the record. And so I really like that record. And then one day I'm just chilling. I wake up in the morning to a DM from him. And he's just he followed me and DM'd me and said, yo, I love your music. And I'm just wow, that's such an honor, because I'm obviously a fan of your music. You're the Prince of Soca right now. So it's super dope. And he's like, yeah, we got to work on something. I'm like, oh, 100%. So, a couple months went by and I'm listening to different beats and stuff, trying to work on some stuff for myself. But then this one particular beat came across my desk from Jay Shams. And I was like, bro, I need that. I have an idea. I know who I want to put on that. So, I wrote the record and I came up with the hook and everything, and I did all that, and then I sent it to him, and then he did what he did and sent it back, and that's how Relax kind of came about. And I was always kind of grateful for that opportunity just to work with him, because a lot of times we people are a little bit big for their bridges. You don't really see artists with that kind of following and that kind of momentum just kind of reaching out to different artists yo, I want to work. Sometimes they're just too cool for school. So I always appreciate when an artist of any caliber is just yo, you're dope, whatever. I don't really care about followers and stuff. There's artists who have 20 followers, but their music is dope. I'll collaborate with you. I don't care. So I just appreciate him kind of recognizing that the sound was dope and wanting to work.
Yeah, and it's also a good record for Caribana too, which is coming up too. So how do you feel about that whole situation coming up soon, with Caribana coming back?
Well, that was the idea. The kind of idea behind it was is Caribana Weekend coming up? Let's just put out a record that kind of encapsulates what Caribana feels like for us. And I'm Guyanese, so soca's in my blood. So for me, it was collaborating with a soca artist and a hip hop artist on this record. It kind of speaks to the city. The city's a melting pot. So to have those two genres kind of hit like that, I thought it was a dope idea.
Definitely. And nowadays too, like a lot of artists, like they don't really talk about like their studio process in that sense too. So for you, like what would a day in the studio be like for you in that sense?
For me, recording in the studio is kind of it's fun. I don't like people in the studio with me. That's one. Like if I'm in the studio, it just has to be me, my engineer, sometimes the producer. I'm cool with the producer being in the session. I usually like that so that he can or she can tweak the beats and whatever they need to do right then and there. If there's a feature, that's about it. And I just sit and I work. I'm really hands-on now with music. I know how I want things to sound. So if it's like I need to switch up the production a little bit, like I'm hands-on with that. If it's like, I need to make some edits or anything like that, I want my vocals to sound like this. I went to school for audio engineering, so I can talk to an engineer in their language. It's very much an intimate process for me, because at the end of the day, when the record doesn't come out the way you want it, that's your fault. So I don't like distractions. People always have entourage in the studio. I can't stand that stuff. No distractions.
Now, most definitely. I mean, I had a previous interview with the members of Enlisted Negroes, which is T. Scott and Cajun, and they talked about their process of like not wanting like people like in the studio, because you kind of feel like more comfortable like being you in that sense to even like communicating to, like just getting the process going in that sense. So
100%, 100%.
And I know that you sort of talked about being in the studio for the first time too, with I think one of the artists that you mentioned. So how was it, being in that experience for the first time, and what was like that actual like experience like?
For me, which artist depends.
I think I don't know if this was like this should be T minus, so like because that was
my first experience. So T minus sent me to the studio. He gave me the Connect, so I went, and it was Logic. Logic was the engineer of the session. Him and a guy named Champagne, they were engineering. But Logic was really hands-on with me. Like, he guided me through the process, because that's my first time, like, professionally recording. And I just remember him, like, guiding me through the process and giving me, like, pointers and just hyping me up. And I had my mom there with me. And, like, at that time, I guess, like, other people were smoking in the studio. So I just remember my mom sitting through that with me. I was 14. So that experience was fun. It was interesting. But it made me fall in love. I love the vibe. I love the energy. And just to be able to walk away with a product, that to me, that propelled everything else that I did after that.
Most definitely. And, I actually want to get into Hollywood Fresh right now, because I was actually, like, watching the music video, like, way, not way back then, just, like, earlier on today. And, I kind of, like, as we said, like, we talked about the vibe and all that, like, a lot of like unique 2010 vibe and all that. Like during that time, you see like Mims in the background, you see some people dancing in the background, you see Dougie Fresh as well, like the sample being played and all that. Some shots near the Apollo, Times Square, and just like throughout Harlem and in that sense too. So tell me more about that music video and what that experience was like for you, and like just like shooting that music video in that sense, since it was your actual like first music video at the time.
Hollywood Fresh was an interesting experience. I was 16. That was my like first official single, and it was like a big budget video. So to be able to to jump into something like that so big, like we had to get permits from the city. We had police escorts. I had my own private chef. I had a Winnebago. I had my own stylist. I had gear picked out for me. That pink car, the pink Range Rover, that was Cameron's old car. Like, there's just so much history in that video from like a 16-year-old from Ajax at the time. And it was almost incomprehensible. Like, I couldn't understand this moment at that age. In that video, it took us 26 hours to shoot. We shot that in New York. Dougie Fresh invited us to shoot it at his house. So the brownstone that you see me in front of is his house. That's his studio we were in. And that's his backyard where him and I were in. And he was on his Segway. He was super excited to show me his Segway, which was really dope. So we were in his backyard on his Segway, which I thought was really cool. Having Mims in the video, that was... him and my cousin know each other. And... I just remember she called him and said, listen, my cousin's shooting a video in Harlem. And he's like, I'm pulling up. And so he came, and he had to catch a flight to India in like an hour. But he stayed just to get his parts and like his cameos in with me. And I remember he sent his cousin with his bags, and he's like, go get my stuff checked in, like I'll be there, kind of thing. So I always appreciate that. Mims was always a good mentor. You know, anytime I needed anything or any advice, he was a great person to talk to. Um, you know, just I always appreciated that kind of connect there. But just to have like Mims dancing in my video, like just chilling with me, like that was cool, because it was just a couple years after his hit single "This Is Why I'm Hot." You know what I mean? So people knew who he was buzzing all over. So it was great to have him there. Um, and then obviously just to have Dougie Fresh as a mentor at that time as well, and someone who kind of took me under his wing and, you know, just gave me the whole swag that I had. I just really appreciated it. What a lot of people don't know is Hank Shockley was there, and Hank Shockley's part of the Bomb Squad, one of the most legendary production groups of all time. So Hank was actually also there, and he took some pictures on the set. A lot of the pictures I posted from that set was Hank Shockley. So he was there. So him and Dougie Fresh kind of connecting and telling stories from back in the day was like iconic. Like I'm sitting in between two legends who I look up to and admire, telling stories, you know, and just chilling with me at my video shoot. So that was comfortable. It was awesome. I had a great time, and the process, while tiring, was super rewarding. You know, we shot a scene in the Empire State Building, and I remember when we were going in there, they were like, you know, you can't film in here after 9/11. Like no one's allowed to film in here. And so one of the guys who was the director at Coogee at the time, rest in peace, Phil Payman, passed away last year. He had invited he invited us up to the Coogee headquarters. So he's like, you could shoot in here. And it was like, he's like, but no one has shot after 9/11. They shut that down. No one's allowed to shoot in here. But they let us take our camera up and shoot on the 66th floor of the Empire State Building. So that was great. I always see that, and like I always see that stat everywhere, like that kind of history lesson everywhere. And I was like, if we really were, that's like really cool. You know what I mean? Like, how do you ever know that? But like, that's what they told us. No one has ever shot here after 9/11. No one's allowed to shoot here. So that was like really, really cool to be able to do that inside the Married to the Mob headquarters, which was also on the 66th floor. Just so much little historic things happened at that video shoot, and I'm forever grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah. And you know, like in one of the scenes too, like from what I've noticed, like in Times Square, you know, you were wearing like this like black dress at the time too, with like a pearl like necklace too. So it was kind of like an interesting experience, you know, having the whole like swag fit, like with the snapbacks, with the Lettermans, and then having that like one scene like with dress and like the pearl like necklace and all that. So did you feel like, you know, it was like something that, you know, that was never really like in your vibe at that time too?
100%. My mom made me do that. Like that's my mom. Like my mom always had this thing where like, oh, you're such a tomboy, you're such a tomboy. You should make it a little more feminine. So I did that for her, but I didn't like that look. I didn't think it fit in the video. I'm like, this is such a random look to throw in the video. But because my mom wanted it, I was like, no problem, I'll do it. But that's all. It's, you know, as an adult, I, you know, dress differently now. I always dress, you know, I wear a lot of dresses and sundresses and whatever now, and heels. But I played basketball. Like that was my swag. I wanted hoodies and hats and sneakers. And it's still my swag to this day. But just, you know, I obviously, like I said, dressed it up a little more. But that was for my mom.
Most definitely. I want to get more into the whole like Angela James tribute, like on TSN. You know, like the first black Canadian like hockey player too, like first black female Canadian hockey player. I forgot to add that. So you know, you were actually doing like the commercial and the hosting for that. So how did you manage to get that placement, and what was that experience like for you being on a major like non-music platform to be the one to do the tribute?
Angela James, like you mentioned, she's an icon. She's a hockey icon, not just for women or for Canada, but like a hockey icon. So for me to be able to get that to get the opportunity to do that tribute, a good friend of mine who almost used to rap, Kwame, hit me up and he was like, yo, Keish, do you do poetry? And I was like, not really, you know, when I was younger, but now I rap. He's like, okay, can you do poetry? And I'm like, yeah, I can do it. He's like, okay, I'm going to tell them that you can do poetry and that you do poetry. And I'm like, okay, who's they? And he was like, TSN. And I'm like, oh, whoa, okay. And he's like, yeah, give me a minute, I'll call you back. So he calls me back and he says, okay, so TSN's looking to do a tribute for Angela James for, you know, for Black History Month. And I pitched you. They asked me who I thought would be a good fit, and I pitched you. Now, he's one of like the biggest kind of people in hockey right now in Canada. He bridges a lot of gaps. He has a documentary and stuff like that about hockey in Canada. So just, he had that connect and he thought of me, which I was always grateful for. Like, you thought of me, and I'm grateful you called me for this opportunity. So, TSN connected with me and they said, listen, we need this piece for Angela James. We want like a spoken word segment over some, ambiance, and we're going to put some clips in, and this is how it's going to go. And I said, okay, cool. So what's the turnaround? Like maybe like a month or two, like I can have this done in a month or two. They're like, okay, that's dope. I need it in 6 days. And I'm like finished? Or like, we need it recorded in 6 days. And I was like, okay, I can do that too. So I just started jotting. I just started jotting that. My dad had a book about her. He had a book about her because he's a journalist. He always has books about everyone. So he had a book about her and just kind of some of the stuff that I knew, but also a couple more things I researched. And I was able to. I had to sit with myself and ask myself, what is the importance of telling this story? Because when you're telling a story about someone like that, you have to be really careful. So I said, what message do I want to tell the world about Angela James? And when we talk about history, this person made history, and this person's historical, and this person's a legend, what does that look like? So that's why the piece is titled, What Does History Look Like? And that's where I came up with the idea of, people ask me, like, was that TSN's idea or yours? I said, it was mine. I wrote everything. So what does history look like? It looks like this black girl from Flemington Park. And so that was the main course that I wanted to go with, and I built around that. And I came up with that piece within like a day or so. I wrote the piece in a day, recorded it 2 days later, and within a week we were filming. One of the coldest days on record. We're filming on ice at the Rink of Dreams. Shout out to Elise, Alex, the whole family, David, like such a dope family for letting us into their space at the Rink of Dreams and shooting there. So we shot that there, and a couple days later, it came out, and just to see how TSN put it together, it was just, every time I watch it, I get emotional. It was an emotional piece. It was very, very honest, and it made a lot of people look in the mirror, especially within hockey, as we know that hockey has a lot of racism and things that they're still dealing with. So it made a lot of people look in the mirror, and it made a lot of young black girls see themselves and see that they can do what Angela James did. And then I remember Angela called me a couple days after that came out, and she was grateful, obviously, and we got to speak, and I was so overwhelmed that she liked it. She was happy about it. That was like the biggest thing. Like, I want her to like this. So it was great. It was a great experience, and TSN was super nice to work with, very easy and very chill to work with. I was like, something I'll never forget, how chill they all were. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
It was like very like interesting, like from her being the same area as like you for a bit too, and just even like the whole like accolades as well too, in that sense. And I do feel like I want to add this like question to right now, because I think when we talk about like legends, a lot of people have like a different meaning on like when it comes to the whole perspective of a legend. And I feel like you're a legend in your own sense too, because you've done like so much that no other artist can do, or like no other artist could like ever experience in that sense too, even if it means that you're not as like big or like not as like well known as that person in that sense too. But like even like with these like accolades that we talked about, like the youngest female hip-hop artist to have 3 songs in rotation at Flow, and the Empire State Building situation, do you consider yourself like a legend when it comes to the history and like legacy of Toronto and Canadian hip-hop in the rap scene?
Oh, that's such a loaded question. It's interesting because it's hard for me to feel that way, but I understand why that conversation happens and why there's articles that say that literally say legend in the making or call me legend and stuff. When we think of legend, we think of like older people, and I'm still in my 20s, so it's kind of like, how can I be a legend? But when I think of how long I've been doing this, I started this when I was 16. This all started for me at 16. So it's been 13 years, right? So it's the stuff that I've been able to accomplish, and the things that I've done, when I sit back and like look at them and I read the rap sheet, or other people read, every time I do shows and interviews and they read the bio, I'm sitting there like, dang, I did that. Like, it's like a shocking thing for me. I actually did that. The whole having 3 songs on Flow thing. I mean, even that, those things to me at the time, I didn't know. You don't know these things, right? It wasn't until I was told, we were submitting a song. The second song we were submitting, and they told us no because at the time they only want one artist, one song per artist, kind of, obviously unless you're a bigger name. And so then they put the Hollywood Fresh remix in rotation while the first one was just on its way out. And then when that song was on its way out, we had a song with myself and JB and bassline called "Make It Look Easy" that was executive produced by P Rain. So that was making its way into the airways. So it was like those three songs kind of playing, and it's interesting because it's interesting like that they had that dynamic that exists where they don't do that. So again, something like that to me is like a fluke. Like that just doesn't happen, and I'm just kind of grateful for the opportunities for a lot of people who check for me and a lot of people who give me the leeway to do what I want to do as an artist. And I'm just grateful. I work hard, man. Like I work hard. I'm at an age and a point now where it's like you're doing this for so long, you get tired. It's exhausting almost, but there's just so much more music to put out. There's so much more stories to tell. So I'm kind of here. I'm sticking around.
And like it's even like solidified too in that sense. Like when I was, because like I think our first interaction like was like through IG. When I made this like list, for spring 2021, and this is like at the time you did your whole like Angela James tribute in that sense too. I felt like that was like something to highlight, because you don't see no other Toronto artists like doing that in that sense too. And I did kind of stop like I did kind of stop like making like these like lists right now because of the whole repetition of what's going on. But just like seeing that impact like even right now, like it's something to showcase in that sense too, even if you're not like releasing like music or doing anything else too. So
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, I want to get back into the whole like into the sorority situation. So I think I only have like this one question right now, but like looking back at that legendary cipher that you did on International like Women's Day, with Lex, with Vaya, with Phoenix, would you say that like the people who helped created that process, like with Team Backpack and 40 Ounce Heroes, who actually hosted like the video, played a pivotal part in establishing like that drive in forming the sorority in that sense?
Oh, of course. I'm very much for the artist and for the creative. In any aspect of art that you do, I'm for you, right? So there will never be a time where I'll take away an accolade from someone who has done anything. 40 Ounce Heroes. I was brought into the cipher by Riley Kirkwood, who does artist management, and just Riley wears so many hats. He's just one of the dopest people you'll ever meet. I was brought in by Riley, and I don't think Riley was part of 40 Ounce Heroes, but I do know that the other artists were brought in by different people in 40 Ounce Heroes at the time. And just 40 Ounce Heroes shooting that, we shot that at Post Office Sounds. Shout out to Chris and Evan, who are over there. That's just all of it worked together cohesively to put, we wouldn't have come together if it wasn't for the Team Backpack and all these kind of entities bringing us together. So we have to tip our hat to them, and I always do, and just shout out to them for having that vision and bringing us together. Yeah,
most definitely. And you've noticed like that growth since too, even from those times, like with that cipher with Hollywood Fresh, and to now, like when even before, like when you were working with T Minus at the age of like 15, 16, to even now with these like two singles out right now, the Angela James tribute. Like, have you noticed that growth by any chance?
Yeah, well, I never actually worked directly with T Minus, but working in like with those kind of people in that circle, just to now, I mean, it equipped me for now. Like those early experiences equipped me to be able to handle my own now. I can read my own because I got ripped. I signed a bad. Well, my mom signed a bad contract on my behalf. Obviously, we didn't know too much about the industry when I was 16. I can read my own contracts now. I equip myself with the knowledge to do everything that I want to do in this music industry. I went to school. I went to school and they taught us about managing our own tours. They taught us about managing our own merchandise, our own live shows, all those things to equip me to be able to do what I do independently. So it's just, everything drives the other thing. I think all of these things had to happen in my life for me to be able to sit here today. You know what I mean?
Most definitely. I just have some of these couple questions left over, but I want to talk because you've worked with like other people like aside from Dougie Fresh and all that. So you worked with Geechee, Suede of Camplo, Diamond D, like a well-known producer, and even with Mims. And I know you talked about like Mims, like Forbidden Essence too. But how did you manage to work with Geechee, Suede, and like Diamond D, and what was like working with them like in terms of creating music and like learning from them?
So Suede, like one of my best friends. That's like Suede is like one of the coolest people you'll ever meet. He could be a headache, but he's one of the coolest people you'll ever meet. He's a compassionate and caring person. He's so talented. So Suede obviously is one of the two members of the legendary hip hop group Camp Lo. Camp Lo had one of my favorite albums of all time, which was called Uptown Saturday Night. One of my, it was one of the greatest albums in my opinion, hip hop albums, because of how ahead of its time it was, how fly it is. The album was just futuristic in my opinion. Ski Beats on the production, and so just to kind of get to know Suede over the years, just like Suede just kind of we just kind of connected on social media, and from there we became cool, and we just used to hang out a lot, and just make music and vibe and just listen to music and go back and forth with music opinions. And so it's ironic because even though we used to kind of vibe off of different records and verses and stuff, we never really made a song together. So it wasn't until this year where he gave me a verse for a record that I have coming out soon, and I did some background vocals for him on a record that he's putting out soon. So I thought it was really dope that we finally, I've known Suede for over 10 years, and we finally connected and got to do something together this year. So that's kind of how that came about. And Diamond D's like one of the dopest people you'll meet too. It's ironic how I met D. So D was on tour, Stunts, Blunts, and Hip Hop album, I believe. It was like the 25th anniversary, I want to say, of that album. They were on tour. And it was either 20 or 25th, one of the two. But they were on tour, and they were at the Phoenix. He was at the Phoenix. And I remember DJ Mo Boogie calling me like, yo, let's go to the show. And I just flew in from New York because I was chilling. Camp Lo had an album release that they were doing some stuff there. So I was in New York with them. And I remember thinking, like, I just flew in that night. And I was like, yo, I just don't feel like going anywhere. I just want to go home and sleep. And Mel was like, no, just come kick it with me. So I said, okay, cool. She said, yo, I got backstage pass too. So, we'll go back there and we'll kick it with them. And I said, all right, cool. So we get there, and there was supposed to be 3 backstage passes for me, myself, Mel, and one other person. But that other person brought someone and took my pass. So it's only Mel had a pass. So she's like, yo, my bad. I said, no, don't worry about it. It's cool. So I was in the crowd. I was kicking it. And then one of the opening act for that show was King Rain. And so King did his set, and then he came down after his set because he saw me in the crowd, and he came down and he slid something in my hand when he hugged me, and I opened my hand, it was a wristband to go backstage. So I went backstage, and then that's how I got to meet Diamond D. Him, myself, and Mel were kicking it, chopping it up, having a conversation. It was really dope. And then from there, I took a picture with him, and I posted it on my Facebook. And my cousin knew him. They grew up together in Brooklyn, and when my cousin lived in Brooklyn, and he was around the way in Bronx. So my cousin knew him, and my cousin tagged him in the picture and was like, yo, that's my little cuz. And so Diamond D ended up following me, and we became friends on Facebook. And then at that time I was dropping music, so he was listening to some of the stuff I was dropping, and he was like, yo, your stuff is tight. And I was like, I appreciate it. And he's like, yo, we gotta do some work together. And I said, yo, it's an honor. You know what I mean? It was an honor. So he ended up sending me a beat, and he said, listen, if you can, let's do something on this beat. And I said, okay, no problem. And he said, I got this other dope female MC on this beat too. And I said, that's what's up. It's cool. It's ironic that you said that, because I was thinking of getting this girl on this record who's a friend of mine who's super dope. He's like, yeah, what's her name? I said, Lyric Jones. He said, that's exactly who I got on this record. So I was like, wow, this was so meant to be. So, we did that record, and that was 2017, 2016. I don't know when D's dropping the record. The record's done. It's out. We shot a video to it. Whenever D drops the record, it's dope. But at the end of the day, just working with him was absolutely legendary, and he's just a pleasure. He's an absolute pleasure.
Most definitely, and you gain these wonderful experiences with these people, depending on the vibe, and it's not even just a studio vibe too. It's going to their shows, or just meeting them at an album release party too. So you kind of have that interesting sense on who they are as people, and versus like what the persona was like in the music and all that sense too. So it's interesting.
Exactly.
So with Toronto right now, I do feel like it's on a high note, like in terms of the impact of the music scene going on right now, with Rolling Loud coming up, with a lot of artists like dropping too. But how do you feel about the Toronto scene like right now? Do you feel like there should be some changes on the direction of the scene, of where the scene should go to, or you feel it's fine the way it is?
Um, I think we need more structure as per usual, a little more business savvy people kind of helping push this thing, but I'm not mad about the way that Toronto is going right now. I think I'm loving that our a lot of our trap and drill artists and these young guys just telling their stories from their neighborhoods. I love the attention that they're getting. They're getting these cult followings on social media and on the streaming and stuff. So it's really good. I would love to see their craft be refined as well. I'm excited to see a lot of them on the Rolling Loud stage, because a lot of them haven't even performed on big stages yet. So to see a lot of them get that opportunity is super heartwarming for me. I love that. When they get exposure to those kind of things and they start to tour and do things like that, it'll open up their eyes to how big this thing could really be. So I'm just interested. I'm just excited to see how it's going. There's a lot more ladies who are just killing it, absolutely killing it. And it makes me so proud to see, a lot of these people are doing charts and stats, and I always just try to tell you, don't care about those things. Like, just don't worry. Don't let that get to you. Don't let that get you down. If you're not number one on a chart, or if you're not showing up on charts, it's okay. That doesn't define what you're doing. It's just, just keep working. My biggest thing is to everyone, keep working. Don't stop. Just keep, you love it, keep working.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And like I do want to kind of like open up for a bit too. I can't hold it in for too long too, but I do feel like even with the charts and like lists too. I do feel like when I did it like at first too, like last year, it was sort of like just like as an inspiration from Say Cheese and all that, just on like what the styling was and all that too. But I think once people got tired of the list, like because other people are making like lists now in that sense too, I feel like it's not really like structured on like how it is right now too, and it kind of took the fun out of that sense too. But even like it kind of made me reflect on everyone's like important in that sense too, in terms of the music. Like I do feel like everyone's like sharing a story in that sense, and their story might be different from others in that sense too. And I think just like ranking it based off of, like lyrics or with everything else too, like it kind of takes away the factor of like what their story is and what their impact is too. So I do, like as you said too, charts don't mean anything too, like lists don't mean anything too. It's like someone's opinion at the end of the day. It's like a streaming number at the end of the day too. Like whatever makes you happy and whatever like keeps you going in that sense too, just go with it.
And that's the biggest thing. I mean, when you put out that list and everyone, oh, I didn't this, it's like, this is his personal opinion. Like, these are people who this is their opinion, and you made it really clear on what the criteria of the list was. And I just don't think that people should challenge people's kind of opinion. Like, that's your opinion. So I just feel like there's too much focus on those kind of things, and people kind of base their worth on that. And if I could tell every artist, just don't base your worth on other people's opinion.
Exactly. So I kind of stopped for a reason too, because I've seen other people like make their list too, and them kind of like not caring, but like realizing that if you have a big platform that kind of causes like a lot of issues too, you're gonna have to, you can't just like go with what you value in that first purpose on like caring, like showing love, and then making that list as one way or another and all that, so you kind of have to like think about that too in that sense.
Yeah, 100%.
Just to end off the interview right now, so what's next for you in terms of any music, any creative projects and so forth, and do you have any final words you'd like to say for any creative or any person out there pursuing their dreams?
Like I said, don't stop. That's the word I have for you. As far as any future upcoming projects, I have songs just dropping throughout the year. You just expect more music from me. Like I said, I got a feature with Suede on the next record. That's gonna be really dope. Just more music coming, more music and more collaborations, and Lex and I have more songs dropping. So we're really excited about this particular time in in our career and in our creative development. So stay tuned.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Keysha Freshh, you know, a legend in the like, not even a legend in the making, just like a legend in general too. Thank you for coming by to TLOY to speak more on your story, to speak more on everything else too. It's like an honor and a privilege to have you on the platform too, to share your experiences, to share your knowledge too, in that sense too. And you know, I wish nothing but the best for you in terms of your career and in terms of everything else too. You know.
Thank you, man.
All right. Until next time.